we got a little bit of a time limit, but I want to do these because we'll do a bunch of them over the years or whatever. But I want to do a fairly in-depth kind of view into your history in the car world, and we'll kind of do them in stages maybe. So I'll start as your early life, early career. Can you paint a picture of your childhood for someone who's never heard kind of where you grew up, what it was like, that kind of stuff? Sure.
I mean, early childhood, my mom, your Oma, used to say the first restoration that I was involved in was a guy named Frankie, and we had 11 roomers in a house, and, my parents were typical immigrants, so they came here, didn't speak the language that well, and just, did what it took to make ends meet. So we had 11 roomers in that first house, and Frankie had a little Volkswagen Bug, and he was painting his hubcaps silver, or painting the wheels silver.
So
I'm 2 years old.
Let me back you up there. Yeah. Frankie is a roomer, like a tenant.
A tenant.
By the week?
By the week.
Okay. In a house in Toronto.
A house in Toronto down by Hyde Park. So they'd bought a bigger house, but to make the mortgage, we had 11 roomers that rented by the week, that my mom would do the laundry and, do everything for those things. They wouldn't feed them, but would, do their laundry and stuff like that. And then there was 4 kids. So she was running, and my dad was, European background and a welder and, working the night shift and that sort of thing. So anyway, Frankie was in the driveway and he's painting the wheels to his Volkswagen Bug, and I grabbed the spray bomb and I spray myself in the eyes.
At 2 years old?
At 2 years old, and my mom's got to take me to the hospital to get the shit out of my eyes. And,
yeah.
So there's the first time I picked up a spray bomb.
So that was your first restoration attempt. Yeah.
First help. So, but she chuckles at that now.
Yeah.
And so then fast forward, we moved out to Etobicoke, and like I said, my dad was a welder, so he had some equipment at home. He had a compressor and spray gun and a welder and that sort of stuff.
But when you were still young, like all little boys, or not all little boys, but a lot of them kind of gravitate towards anything with tracks, a dozer, a car, or whatever. Did that describe you?
I was into models.
Okay.
So I would have, little models that you would build, plastic models, and 1/24 scale or whatever they were. And then, the Wankel rotary engine, and then the V8 engine, and did all that stuff as a kid, and some planes. It was kind of interesting. I remember doing a Spitfire, and my favorite plane was a Corsair, and so would build models, and I would swap stuff. It was kind of funny because I would take a motor out of a, Jungle Jim's funny car and try and stuff it into, a regular car. And, I would try and plastic weld, the...
Would you have like a little lighter and
heat
it up?
Yeah, heat it up, and I'd my spray bombs for painting the bodies and stuff, and then my little model brushes and stuff like that. So I built model cars and the odd plane, and so I guess that's the first glimpse into I really like cars. Right. And that first V8 engine was kind of cool because it made it work, and I think I bought you one too.
You did. We assembled it like every morning before you went to work when I was like 5.
Yeah.
And it was like a little completely see-through engine that turned on a crank, and the oil was like vegetable oil.
Yeah.
And you taught me exactly how an engine worked.
Yeah.
And you built one of those.
I built one of those as a kid too.
And that's what got you kind of... So it wasn't just that you were into cars, it was more that like... From an early age, it was restoration type stuff and modification type stuff.
Yeah. Like I didn't want to just build the model. I wanted to change it and tried using pieces from this and this and, make it look different.
Right. And that was from how old? 5 years old?
No, probably a little bit older, probably like 8, 9, 10 type thing.
Right.
And then
it must have been bicycles.
Oh yeah,
after that.
it's funny you say that. So yeah, so the bicycles was the next thing, and I still remember the Mustang bike, and high handlebar with the sissy bar and the banana seat and
The chopper.
and
Yeah.
everybody had it. And because Chops was a welder, and Chops is my dad's nickname.
Yeah.
When he was around, so he was a welder, so he would make us these choppers. And I remember Dave, your uncle.
Yep.
He had the biggest chopper in the neighborhood because my dad did these forks and he thought he was crazy, and Dave would say, "Oh, make them longer." So he had these, 3-4 foot long forks, and it could barely drive the thing, but it was the coolest looking thing. And then we'd ride to school, and it was me, Bob Bailey, and Graham Richards, and there'd be three of us, one guy on the banana seat, one guy pedaling, and the other guy
On one bike?
On one bike, on the
Jeez.
handlebars. So, and then, it had a 3-speed, and I took it apart and painted it and, tried again. And you used to be able to buy a slick tire.
Okay.
And I used to deliver newspapers, and it was cool to have this slick tire. But then in the rain, I remember a guy had just blacktop his driveway. I get on that blacktop, and it had been raining, and I just wipe out, and there's newspapers all over the place.
Jeez. So when did you start delivering newspapers?
I was probably 7 years old. 7 or
Okay.
8 years old, and I did that right until I was actually driving, because I remember doing down routes when I had a license, because I'd do them downtown Toronto. And then we grew up in a little bit of a rougher area in Etobicoke, and I remember doing the newspapers in these apartment buildings, and the apartment buildings were pretty rough. And I remember, putting the newspaper bag in the elevator door. I didn't want to lose my elevator, and I'd run and throw them. And I said to the guys, the Toronto Star at the time, I said, "I'm not collecting money here.
Right.
I'll deliver the newspapers. I'll do it really early Saturday mornings, but I'm not collecting."
Did they expect you to?
No, they understood the situation there. Yeah.
So you would go up to, like, say, the third floor and leave your bag to hold the elevator
Oh
door
yeah,
open.
run, do all the deliveries, and then go to the next floor, run, do all the. So I'd never give up that elevator.
Was
for
there
the
any
whole thing.
specific reason? Like, did you ever see anything going on there? Or just
Well,
the reputation?
the reputation, but I mean, there was, when I grew up, so we lived across the road, and you probably remember it a little bit. We lived across the road from a school, so literally walked across the road to school. And then beside that was this little plaza. And when I was 16, I had an old 69 Impala that my brother's, girlfriend at the time, her parents gave to me to use. Like it was like a junker. It was ready
Yeah.
for the scrap heap, so we kind of fixed it. But I still remember coming home one night, and there was a little turf war between the two rival gangs there, and it was blown up. I mean, literally, there was a firebomb they put in it, and I come home, and my car's in the parking lot, burnt to a crisp. And then next door, and it was funny because the guy's name I'll never forget, because my brother's friend to this day is Dave Rankin, and he got murdered. He got stabbed across the road, but it wasn't my brother's friend.
Right.
It was just a guy that had the same last name.
Oh, I see.
So we had thought at first it was Dave Rankin. Holy crap. But
Didn't
it
know he was
a
caught
different-
up in all this stuff.
It was a different Dave Rankin.
Wow.
Yeah.
Across the street.
Across
at
the
school.
street. So it was, for
Okay.
the most part it was good, but
Sure.
it wasn't, a super,
Right.
you know.
Why, what was the impetus for you to go and get a paper route at 7, feeling like, did you have this passion to be successful, or was it more necessity to buy stuff?
Necessity 100%. So, Chops made, I don't know, not much money an hour. I don't know what the hourly rate would have been, but
Yeah.
I remember when I was working in a grocery store at, 16, 17, I was making more hourly as, stocking shelves as my dad was making as a welder.
Mm-hmm.
So we didn't have any dough. And I remember the first year that they moved out to Etobicoke from, giving up the 11 roomers, that they'd kind of screwed up on the mortgage, and we had literally porridge for breakfast, lunch, and dinner.
What happened?
So they thought that it was $5,000 down, and the rest would be the mortgage. But it was $5,000 deposit with another $5,000 down. So they didn't have the second $5,000, and they didn't qualify, I guess,
Right.
for enough money. So they, begged and borrowed and did whatever it took. And typical, again, trying to pay it back as fast as they could, scrimped and saved. And literally, for almost a year, we had porridge for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And we were kind of pissed off because, my dad would have a piece of meat for dinner, and we'd have the porridge. It was like, geez, type thing. So if
None
we
of you
want
guys like porridge anymore.
No, it took years. It wasn't until maybe 10 years ago I could face a bowl of porridge.
Yeah.
But so my dad said, if you want to play hockey, or you want to buy that bike, or you want to do whatever, you need to go and work and get a paper route. And paper route was really the only thing that we could get. And it's funny, Uncle Irwin and I were talking the other night about early jobs, and he was saying one of his first jobs is he tried being a worm picker. And
what, for the convenience store or something?
Yeah, for for baiting hooks and stuff.
Yeah.
And he thought, oh, this is great because it's piecework. So he went on the bus, and they went to the golf course, and I guess the water from the irrigation would pop all the worms out. And he said, there was 5 Mexicans on the thing, and those guys, hardworking people and stuff. So he's a young kid, and he goes, oh, I think we can make more money doing this than newspapers. And so after like 6 hours of picking worms, he gets his count out there, and it's 162 worms. And to put that in perspective, the professional worm pickers brought in 17,000.
Oh my goodness! He didn't have the right technique.
Didn't have the right technique.
So he got paid like 50 cents or something.
Yeah. And 6 hours and a $2 bus ride.
Oh, that's hilarious.
So it was a necessity to go out. If we wanted to do anything, we had to earn it.
Right. So then, you're riding bikes, and I'm sure you've saved some money from your newspaper route. What was your first? Well, no, let me back that up. What was your first driving experience? Because I'm sure it was well before you had your license.
It was. So my brother had a 70 Mach 1.
Who's 4 years older.
Yeah. So he was, I guess, 18, and I was 15. He was probably just turning 19. And so it was a 70 Mach 1, and it was a stick. It was a Cleveland, and he taught me how to drive a stick. And then I'd done some work for him. And then
on that car.
Okay. So he taught me how to drive that. And then I bought a 71 Mach 1 that, Chops took us to go look at. It was $200.
And you were what, 14 or
15?
15.
15.
Okay. Yeah.
And it had been, it sideswiped the telephone pole, so it needed a bunch of quarter panel work and stuff. So I fixed that in the driveway, painted it in the driveway, sold it, and made some money. So that was really the first car that I worked on. So I drove that around the neighborhood, totally illegally.
Yep.
And that same.
Did you even put a plate on it?
No, I don't. Like we just
around the block.
Just around the block, or whatever. And then what was funny is there was a guy with a Datsun 510
at high school.
No, around the corner from us, I used to deliver his newspapers. I still delivered his newspapers because I still delivered them at 15.
Yep.
And he'd seen the Mach 1 that I did in the driveway, and he said, "You want to paint my car?" And I said, "Sure." And it needed some body work. So he used to go away for the summer to the cottage. So he left me the keys, and it was a $200 restoration.
Okay.
Okay. And I quoted $200, and I figured there was going to be $100 in materials and stuff and whatever. So, but he left me the keys. And the Canadian Tire, which we'd get our sandpaper and body filler from, was down on Dundas. So it was about a 5-mile drive to get supplies. So I would drive down, get my supplies, and what was funny is the guy that owned the Canadian Tire was a guy named Terry Rady. And Terry Rady had a Duesenberg.
Oh, wow.
He had some serious cars. And I used to joke years later, I'd say, "Hey, Terry, you sold me my first can of body filler, and you sold me my first sandpapers and stuff like that." And we'd chuckle about it. But yeah, the guy owned the Canadian Tire. He had a Duesenberg.
Wow.
And so I would buy the materials. I would come back. I would, work on the car. And anyway, end of the summer, the car's all finished and that. And the guy comes back and there's about, I don't know, 80 miles on the car or more. And he kept track of the speed of it. And he's going, well, what were you doing? And I said, well, I had to get materials. And, so I drove the car to the Canadian Tire and back and forth.
So 10 miles?
So 10 miles each time. And, 8 times to get the materials and stuff.
So there was no extracurriculars in it?
No, there wasn't.
Yeah.
But it was, again, where I learned to drive on the road,
Yeah.
totally illegally, no license.
And what did the guy who owned the Canadian Tire say? Or did he know?
He didn't know I was
thought you were
underage.
16 or whatever, yeah.
Yeah.
Huh.
So it was kind of funny.
So how did that job go? Was the guy happy with it?
Yeah. And then I did another neighbor's car, and I bought my first piece of equipment, which was ESAB MIG welder. And it was because I went to get a quarter panel hung on a car.
But did you guys not have a MIG welder at home?
No. So all my dad had was an arc welder and torches.
Okay.
So it was either braze on the panels, or you can't really arc weld it. Sheet metal. So it was braze on the panels. So I wanted to do this one a little bit nicer, and I took it to a body shop. And what's interesting is that at that body shop is where I met Chris, who was our first employee.
Right.
And he was working there, and they'd quoted, I forget what it was, but for the same money, I could buy the MIG.
Oh, okay.
So I bought the MIG welder and taught myself how to MIG. Well, Opa taught me how to MIG.
Sure.
And so I did that first MIG job doing that. And it was funny, again, I didn't realize, like, when you're MIGing, you got to be careful because it's almost like a sunburn.
Right. Yeah,
so,
if you're doing a lot of it.
Yeah. So I used to work in the driveway in a pair of shorts, no shirt, no nothing. And same thing, the first fiberglass job I did, I came in and just itchy as hell. I was trying to lay fiberglass and do shit, but. Yeah.
So, and who taught? Like, did you just completely teach yourself how to do those restorations? Like, just get it? You understood the, sanding, blocking, it was spraying the primer and painting it?
Pretty much trial and error. Opa had an idea how to do it, but he was a welder. He wasn't a bodyman.
Right.
He'd done some body work in the driveway on his own car.
Yeah.
So he would give me an idea, and then there was another neighbor, Mr. Olson, who also was, pretty handy, and he would say, "Oh, you got to do this or this."
So the neighbors came by and gave you their 2 cents.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And then there were some older kids in the neighborhood,
right,
that were working on their cars, so they would get a little, and then. Mark Thompson and Bob Bailey, we were all into cars. Mark ended up being a mechanic, and Bob was going to school for engineering, electrician. So everybody was handy,
right,
and would work on the cars, and we would kind of learn from each other.
So that first Mach 1, right, that you bought?
Yep.
Did that take you until you were 16, or did you sell it before you were 16?
I sold it before I was 16.
Okay.
And sold that, and I think I paid $200, and I made, I don't know, I sold it for like $2,500. So
huge profit.
Huge profit.
Yeah.
Huge profit. Way better than doing newspapers.
Oh yeah. So you're 15, which is like grade 10. Is there a pretty good scene in high school as far as hot rods and street racing goes?
Yeah.
So you knew when you turned 16, you had to have a fast car.
Well, I wanted one.
Right.
Because, and Bob used to live across the street from literally the local drug dealers.
Okay.
And they all had cool cars. So we used to, sleep in Bob's dad's camper in the driveway and watch all the cool cars, come in, and, they were obviously doing what they were doing, but all the cool cars would congregate there. So it was kind of, those are cool cars. And then the street racing thing was pretty big at Weston and Finch at the time.
Okay.
And we went up there as soon as we kind of turned 16 and got into a little bit of the street racing. And like I said, our neighborhood was a little bit rougher, but there were a lot of guys into cars.
Right.
Yeah.
So when you first showed up there, obviously you didn't run that first night. You just watched.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
I was building the car that I would end up kind of have through high school. And it was a 65 Mustang Fastback. And by the time it was done, it was kind of a semi-Hertz look-alike. But I put a Boss 302 in it and, 2 4-balls hanging through the hood. And I built a set of wheelie bars and louvers. And, I spent every dollar that I made. And at that point, I was, again, working at now Red and White and then at Dominion, so grocery store.
Stocking shelves at night.
Stocking shelves at night, still doing the newspapers and then fixing cars. Yeah.
So that was completely like getting that first car when you were 16. It was completely to go drag race.
It was transportation too, but I wanted it to be really cool. And there was a guy named Chris Matisic who had a 66 Mustang, and then Steve Clark had a Mustang, and my brother had a Mustang. So it was just natural that I would end up buying a Mustang, and then Bob had a Mustang, and Mark had a... So everybody had Mustangs. We were kind of in the Ford part of town.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So was there any of those guys hanging across the street, and were those the same guys street racing, or some of them?
Oh, for sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
And did any of those guys have like pretty expensive off the lot cars?
Right. So so there was a guy named Chumley, and I don't think he's around anymore, but he had an LS6 Chevelle.
Wow.
A Fathom Blue, and killer motor. It was a fast car. And then some of the guys had Corvettes, big 427 Corvettes. So those guys mainly had Chevys. It was interesting enough. And then there was a couple guys on Rabbit Lane, and these guys they made some money. There was Rapid Ralph and another guy, I forget his name now. They made money street racing back then.
Really?
Yeah. So, and they had it dialed in pretty good where one guy would be the flag man and the other guy, was racing, and they would set up the races for money.
Yep.
And, if Ralph was flagging, and I think the other guy's name was Carmen, and if Carmen was flagging or Ralph was flagging, the arms would go up in the air, and he would actually wait for Ralph to launch, and you could see the headlights just starting to move, and then he'd quickly drop his. He'd always get the whole shot.
Oh, so they had a little bit of
they had it dialed in.
Going. Wow. And what kind of money were guys racing for?
It varied. I mean, sometimes it was no money, and other times it was $50 or $100. I think the most we ever saw was $1,000, which was a ton of money.
Right.
Ton of money.
Did you ever see anyone race for their car?
No.
Okay.
No.
So that's more of a movie thing than.
Yeah.
So you show up. How nervous were you the first time you lined up for a street race?
Sure.
I'm sure you probably had some practice against Bob or down the street.
Right.
Yeah.
And we used to, we didn't get in trouble with the cops, but the cops certainly knew who we were and the cars that we had.
Yep. Like today, like anyone who's driving around in a hot rod, a 16-year-old kid around town, the cops know who they are.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the one day when I got the car, I probably did, 20 burnouts in front of Bob's house. The next door neighbor says, "I'm giving you fair warning." I called the cops. So, I fly home, I take the plate off the car, and I leave. And I don't come home that night because I know I'm in shit.
Yeah. So the cops knocked on the
door.
All
the cops knocked on the door, and the next day my dad says, "What happened?" Cops were here, and you're doing burnouts, and this and that. And I said, the clutch, I just couldn't get it right. It was just kept, the spring was too tight, and it was like the return spring was just popping it, and bullshit story.
Yeah.
And my dad starts laughing, and I said, "What did you tell him?" And he said, "I told him that the car was sitting here the whole time. It must have been somebody else." And he knew I wasn't doing bad things.
Right.
But it was enough to get in shit. And Bob got busted one time. He had no plates and nothing on his car. And he ended up paying a pretty big fine. And then there was another time, Mark, we were driving the car around. There was no fenders on the car. We just put the motor in. The doors weren't even on. And Bob's sitting on a milk crate. And, Mark comes around the corner just flying. Bob's hanging onto the rocker and the roof. And, we were out on the front lawn, and there's Mark, cops, and he pulls it into the driveway. We wheel the door down, and we're throwing the Frisbee when the cops come flying around the corner.
Right.
And then I had a police escort for about a week because we were doing more street racing.
As you drive to school?
To school every day. And finally, the last day, it was pretty cold morning, and there was frost on the windshield, and he gave me a ticket for impaired view because I didn't clean the frost off the windshield. I was just blowing a little hole in the bottom of it with the defrost.
Right, so
he was looking for something.
Right.
Yeah.
There was no law against wheelie bars?
No.
That probably looks ridiculous.
Yeah.
You guys did a little bit of go-kart racing.
So we did probably 2 or 3 races. And that's how the nickname Chops came, because Paul Lucky, he had a Camaro with an LS6 or LS7 in it, I forget, or an L88, I forget what he had in it. And he would come with us, and he was more into go-kart racing.
So hang on, explain for the viewers what this scene looked like loading up for the go-kart racing.
So it was in a van, and there was 3 go-karts. So it would be myself, Dave, my younger brother, and Paul. And so we'd jam him into this van, my dad's van, and he would take us to the go-kart track in Georgetown, not far from here.
It's on the street.
Yeah, it's right on this street.
Yeah.
And they were McCullough 101, so 2-stroke go-karts, pretty quick. And we didn't have a clue, not a clue what we were doing. And so we did a couple races up in Georgetown, and then it was kind of like we're spending too much money. It was either the cars or the go-karts.
Right.
So we literally did maybe 2 or 3 races, and then I sold my kart, and I think that we put the second motor on Dave's go-kart, my younger brother, and we went in a parking lot, and now we had 200
twin
cc,
100s,
twin
yeah.
100s in the parking lot, and he ended up hitting the curb hard and bent the axle and stuff, and then he got rid of the go-karts. But we, for the short time we had them, we drove them like cars, and they were,
like on the street.
Oh yeah, and they were like electric starts, so we'd have a battery and a starter and thing. And I remember going down the 427 is the main highway, and I don't know, it's 16 lanes wide. It's one of the busiest highways, and the 2 service roads, we didn't live far off that service road. And we would fire up the go-karts and run them on the street, and we'd be passing guys on the service road like they were standing still.
Oh, I bet.
In these go-karts. And again, cops wouldn't have a chance against the go-kart.
Right.
And that. So, but we ended up selling them. It was probably a good thing because,
yeah,
somebody was
going
to get hurt.
Yeah. Yeah, no kidding.
Yeah.
Oh, so no close encounters. You never got ever like caught red-handed street racing or anything like that. You got away.
Yeah. One time we were lined up. It was really close, and we were lined up, and we could see the headlights coming. And this was up on Steeles before it was a busy street, and we could see the headlight coming. And sure enough, it was a set of cops. And they couldn't do anything because we weren't doing anything.
Right.
But again, we got lucky, and then there was, Willie B.
Yep.
Okay. And it's funny because he just did the cannonball, but he was one of the guys that we would go street racing with. And there was Trinetti, and I think it was the Trinettis, and then Luciani's.
Okay.
And so still know all those guys. Dave, was successful, super successful business guy. And then his brother, Mike, had a Chevy, a 55 Chevy, and we were bolting the slicks on behind this industrial park.
On his car.
On his car. And the cops come by, and they're going, what's going on here, boys? And Trinetti, or no, it was Luch, I forget which one, right, like without thinking, flat tire, we got to change the tires. And,
Big racing
slicks.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Huh. So that time, were you buying and selling or doing odd jobs for guys, or were you just totally focused on your Mustang?
No. So I would fix other people's car.
Okay.
And then do the Mustang stuff and buy and sell cars. So I bought a 74 Corvette. I bought a 68 Shelby. I bought 2 68s, a KR and then a 350. So I would buy and sell cars.
In high school,
fix them up.
Yep.
And did really well. Like the first KR, I want to say I want to say I bought it for, I don't know, $4,000. Again, because I'd sold the Mustang for $2,700, so I bought it for $4,000. Did a bunch of work to it, and sold it for $12,000. So now it's
real money.
Real money.
Yeah.
For back then.
Yeah.
And then I bought a GT500, and that's actually how I met Rob Myers. And now I'm maybe 21 years old.
Okay.
You know, from RM auctions.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
But
so 21. So you're doing that, and like, do you have in high school, like, you must be a successful guy in high school doing that?
Yeah. I mean, was able to buy a cool car, have a cool car to drive.
Yeah.
And yeah.
Yeah. So you had a reputation as a little bit of a car hustler already before 18 years old or 19 years old?
For sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you clearly saw it made sense.
Yeah. And I'd always worked a bunch of different jobs, but I always made by far the most money buying and selling cars.
Right. So you went to university right out of high school.
Mm-hmm.
For what reason?
Probably not knowing what I wanted to do. Probably because my girlfriend, now your mom,
Yeah.
at the time, was going to university, and you know, they grew up on the other side of the tracks compared to ours, so it was kind of like, you know, I should probably go to university. And then Irv, you know, your uncle,
Yeah.
was going to school, and I thought, oh, I'll just do the same thing he's doing,
Right.
type thing. I liked the idea of business, and I liked how businesses worked, and so I took economics.
Right.
And
At Guelph.
at Guelph.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you're doing that. You're still buying and selling cars in university.
Yep.
And what does it look like buying and selling cars at that time? Are you buying them all out of the Auto Trader?
Oh, for sure.
Okay.
So Auto Trader or Toronto Star, the wheel section or whatever, and you would be the first guy Thursday mornings to pick up the Auto Trader, because if it was a good deal, you had to be there early and get it done.
And did you just, like, if someone, you know, was a little bit cheap, you just went and paid the money? You didn't want to risk it.
For sure.
Yeah.
I mean, you'd always try to negotiate, but you were leaving with the car.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So then, as you're going through school, where is your mindset for what you want to do for a work or a business in the future?
It's not there yet of what I want to do. And I also did construction. I worked for Mike Sewell, who was a car guy. So I ended up doing a lot of construction stuff downtown. I worked for Coca-Cola. I worked for the city as a garbage man. And that's how I met Willie B through Turquette and Trinetti and all those guys, and Luciani's.
Working for the city.
Working for the city, I met those guys, and they were all gearheads, the Italian guys, a little further, like, over from where we were.
Yep.
So all the car guys kind of hung out, but I had a lot of different jobs, and then I had a roofing company, and it was BK Roofing. It was Peter Klutt Roofing.
During university?
It was high school and university.
Okay. So you just did it during the summers?
During the summers, and then still worked for Coke and garbage, and so a lot of different jobs and construction.
And what was it, ambition or a drive to be successful that caused you to work so much?
I think that I wanted to be able to buy the cars mainly. It was usually about the cars. But I still remember seeing those cool cars, and you know, you're coming from an area that again is not an upper class area, and you're going, well, I'm going to have to work hard to do this. And I found early on that you can make decent money with the cars, and you still needed the steady income doing those other deals, because sometimes that car deal wouldn't happen for a year, 6 months from the time you bought it to the time you finished it to the time you sold it.
So was it always in your mind that you had to improve the car, or did you ever just do any buys and sells early on?
Early on, it was always improving the car.
Right.
Yeah,
That's
it
where you
wasn't-
thought the money was.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then later, I'm sure you had a couple fall in your lap where it was like, oh, there's $5,000 here.
Right.
Right.
And you didn't have to touch them.
Right.
Yeah.
And that made a lot more
Oh,
sense.
those were beautiful.
So then what did the jump to full-time car restoration and buying and selling look like?
So just finishing school, getting married, not sure what I wanted to do. I was still working at Coca-Cola and Dominion at the time, stocking shelves in Coca-Cola during the day. And I had a 69 Shelby.
Hang on, you were working...
So it was this after I just finished school. So I graduated.
Yeah, but you were working a full-time job at night and during the day?
Yeah. Yeah.
When did you sleep?
Not much. So
That couldn't last long.
it did for a while. At one point I had 3 jobs. I worked Amhill as well, which was doing Dixie Cup lids, and you package them, and it was kind of like I Love Lucy. Most
Like
people wouldn't.
in a factory
In a
job.
factory, and those lids just kept coming. You had to put them in
Okay,
a
yeah.
bag, tape them up, put them in a box.
Yep.
And I was the only white guy in there, I'm telling you.
Yep.
And so I did that as a 3rd job, but I couldn't do it. I burned out. I lasted 2 weeks doing 3 jobs.
Right.
So that was the end of that. And then I bought that 69 Shelby, graduated. So I was still working at Dominion. And Dominion wasn't full-time. It was maybe 2 or 3 nights a week. And during the year, it was Friday nights, sometimes Saturday. And then, but Coca-Cola was full-time.
Right.
And you had
Okay.
your route. And if you hustle your route, same thing with garbage. When I worked as a garbage man, you'd get your route. And if you ran,
Yep.
you were done. So here was your route for the day. And sometimes you could be done at 2 o'clock in the afternoon if you hustled.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So then, what did the jump look like? So you're still working all those jobs, working like a madman. You're married at 21.
22. Yeah, Vic was still 21.
Yeah, 22.
Yeah.
And yeah, what caused you quit all that?
No. So what happened was I had a 69 Shelby 500, and I put it up for sale because we were buying a house. We were getting married. We were engaged. We were going to buy the house. And I sold that and a 68 Shelby that kind of was the nest egg, and it was all into cars, and was always into cars.
Right.
Every dollar I had was into cars.
Okay.
And so I sold the 68 Shelby for 20 grand, which was like a world record price.
Okay.
And I sold the 69 Shelby. Well, I had it for sale.
And this is like 1973, 70.
No.
Oh,
This
sorry.
is
83, 83, 84.
Yeah,
Okay.
84 and just 85. We got married,
Okay,
started
so
the business, and
85-ish.
bought the house.
Right.
Yeah. And so I took that car, and I saw in the Auto Trader RM Restorations, and he was the Shelby King. He named
Rob Myers.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and he named his kid Shelby.
Right.
So I call him up out of the blue, and I don't have a clue who he is.
Okay.
And I said, hey, I see you do a lot of Shelbys. I've got this 69. Do you want to buy it? And he says, what do you want for it? I said, I don't know, 11,000 or whatever type thing. And he said, take it to Rick and Ainsley in Toronto. If they say it's good, I'll buy it. So I took it to Rick and Ainsley, Ainsley's passed away, but his son actually does our dent stuff now, and Rick's still around. We talk to Rick still to this day and do deals with him. And so I take it out to them, and they go, yeah, it's exactly what the kid says it is. So I drive out to Chatham, and I get out there, and he's got this restoration shop and in a little showroom. And we chatted, for a long time. And he didn't end up buying the car. He tried grinding me. And I said, no, pay me $50 in gas money. I'll be on my way. And he paid me the $50, and we've been friends ever since, and obviously done a lot of deals and stuff. And, he's turned into, I think, one of the most successful car guys on the planet.
Sure. Yeah.
And again, hardworking, sort of real blue-collar roots.
Yep.
Aggressive and hardworking guy. But so I came back, and that was where I thought, if he can do that in Chatham, I got to be able to do this in Toronto. Chatham's got, I don't know what it had then, 20,000, 30,000
no
people.
one living there.
Toronto had, 3
Millions.
million people. So I thought, I can do this for a living. And that was kind of the inspiration to try and do it for a living. Yeah.
So what were the next steps there? Like, hey, I got to get a spot. I want to do restorations. I want to buy and sell and do restorations.
Yeah.
Okay.
And that, so we got married. Your mom had a regular job.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I still worked full-time night crew now at Miracle Mart. And then I would come home or go straight to the shop, and we rented a 2,000 square foot shop at Dixie and 401 by the airport.
Mm-hmm.
So I would come home, work on the cars, buy and sell the cars, and sleep for about 6-7 hours, go back into night crew. I did that for about 6 months. And that first year, I ended up buying 60 cars.
Really?
Yeah. And I still have you have to keep
Ledgers?
a ledger for OMVIC. It wasn't OMVIC at the time, but whatever it was. And I bought, I think, 60 some odd cars that first year, and hired Chris, my first guy, who I met when I went into the body shop to see if he would put on quarter panels. And then I bought that MIG welder.
Yeah. So you must have made over $100,000.
The first year we made good money, but it's interesting you say that, because I forget what I made the first year. It wasn't that much, because I had all the expenses of getting
Setting
set
everything
up.
up. Sure, yeah.
Yeah. And I still worked full time at Miracle Mart, and
Yep.
Mom had her regular job, so we were good.
Yep.
And that's when after 6 months, I was getting burned out, and I said, okay, I can make this work.
Right.
And I still remember a guy that owned a training shop, and I forget his name now, but he used to do all our transmissions back then. And I remember him saying, if you can't make $100,000 a year in your own business, you shouldn't be in your own business.
So that was kind of the benchmark.
That was the benchmark.
Right.
Okay. And that's 1985. And to put that in perspective, we bought our first house in 85 for $84,000.
Right.
So if you couldn't make enough money to buy a house,
Yeah. A house a year.
You shouldn't be in business.
Right. Things are a little bit different now with housing prices.
Yeah.
Interesting. So was it a big leap? Was it a big risk to take? Or did you, because you were working that other job, it was like, okay, I've got a soft landing pad.
Sure. We had a soft landing.
Okay.
And, Vicky's job was,
Right. Right. So
the
it wasn't like
security
this
blanket.
just roll of the dice. I
No.
got to make it fly.
No.
But I'm, clearly doing 60 cars. You were hustling.
Yeah.
Right. So then it's, you're working from, call it 1985. You're out of space.
Yeah.
You've done a couple killer restorations.
Yeah. So I still remember the first really good restoration we got to do was for a guy named Cliff Ernst, and
Like a full ground up restoration.
for a customer.
Right.
So the first ones we did were always my own cars that I would restore and then sell.
Right.
And then we had a car down at Barrett Jackson, and I met Cliff at Barrett, and we started talking about cars, and he had a 69 GT500 convertible. And actually, I'd sold him the car already, and we met down there, and he wanted to do it. And it was a really good car to do. And he said, just do a ground-up restoration. And we did a ground-up, and we took it to all the shows and won a ton of awards. I still got photos of it with, 20 trophies. And it was the cover car for Mustang Monthly. And, all of this press that we got was really good. And Cliff was the first guy to really say, do a ground-up resto for me, and I'll pay you to do it.
Right. So then you've got 2,000, then 4,000 square feet, and you're out of space.
Right.
You say, hey, I've got to build a shop, or I want to go find a shop. And you're 27, 28 years old at this time?
Yeah. So 27. And so now it's 1990, 89, 90, and I'm kind of jammed. And a friend of mine, Carmen Malazzi, who owned Number 50 Auto Sales, he'd moved out to Milton. And he said, come on out. I have this empty spot. I'll lease you the land, or I forget what it was, lease the building or whatever. So we drove out to Milton, and around the corner there was a house for sale, and there was enough land to build a shop on it. So we called the guy and we're going, geez, we could sell our house. And the housing market was ballistic at the time, between 85 and 90. That $84,000 house was worth, I don't know, 300,000 or something like that. And I don't remember the numbers, but it had gone up substantially, like 3 times the value. And so I thought, geez, if we could have the house and the shop together, I could swing it. I could build my own shop for what I would pay in rent.
Right.
And so that's what we ended up doing. Around the corner from Carmen's place, we bought the place where you grew up.
Right.
Yeah.
So did you sold your house? Did you sell all the cars to finance building the shop?
Yeah. And that was a stroke of luck. I always say it's better to be lucky than good. So I sold all of the cars because it was really hard to fund a building until it was done from the bank. And I sold almost all the cars to fund the building. And I'd originally wanted to go to school for architecture, and I didn't get in. So I always liked building and the idea of construction and that sort of stuff. So I was acting kind of as general, and then Nick Bajoni, who Paul, obviously his son. We hired him to build the building, but this is what I wanted, and kind of designed it and worked pretty close with them to do it. And so this is now 1990, and real estate goes for a shit. It just goes in the toilet.
Full 90 recession starts.
Cars go in the toilet. And cars, like at that point, a 65 Shelby now is $100,000. It drops way back. Cars that we're playing with today, like a 4-cam Ferrari, was $1.5 million, and it drops down to $300,000 by the time I buy one.
Wow!
And it actually went from, in 1985, it went from 85,000 to $1.5 million. So that's how crazy the car market went. And it's interesting. Rob Myers and I. Both were into Shelbys at that time. And I remember us trading a car back and forth, the same car, within a year or 2 year period. And I forget what we sold it for, call it $40,000 the first time. And then he would pay me $50,000, and I would say, geez, I made a mistake. I'll buy it back for $60,000. And then he bought it. I remember him going to Barrett a couple days before me. And he says, what do you want for that Shelby? And I said, I forget what the numbers were, but call it $70,000. And he says, I'll take it. And by the time I flew out there, I realized I made a bad mistake. They were worth more.
Yep.
And I said to Rob, I said, how much to keep my car?
Right.
And he said $10,000. So I paid him $10,000 to keep my car.
Wow.
And that was, it was at a time
crazy inflationary times.
Very much so. Real estate tripled, cars doubled, tripled, quadrupled. It was, when I started in business between 85 and 90, it was the perfect time to start.
Right.
Because it was idiot proof.
Right. You only could have,
you could only buy too early.
Yeah.
All the mistakes you made would fix themselves. But that stopped in 1990.
But just by happenstance, you got out.
I got out to buy to build the shop, the first shop. I got out of the cars, and by the time, I kind of stuck my head out of the building pit, the sandbox out back, I'm going, holy cow, cars went for a crap, real estate went for a crap. Our real estate went for a crap too, but
you were
didn't
living
matter.
there. It didn't
we
matter.
were living there.
Yeah.
And I needed a place, and all I was looking, rent didn't change dramatically, so the mortgage was still the same amount as the rent would have been.
Right, so it still made sense.
Still made sense.
Okay. So as much as the restorations are absolutely necessary for the business, maybe less so, but you always say today that racing is important for the business.
Mm-hmm.
When did you get into proper racing? Because it must have been just around that time or shortly thereafter.
It was. And I'm trying to think who. Well, you know who it was? It was Mike Douglas, who owned Douglas Lincoln Mercury up in Barrie. And we were at a Shelby convention showing cars, and it was at Watkins Glen. And Mike had a 66 Shelby race car, and he said, jump in the passenger seat and go for a lap. Mm-hmm. And I was hooked. And I'd never been to a proper racetrack until then. And it was just, it was intoxicating.
Right.
Yeah.
So you get back to the shop.
Yeah.
And
I decide I'm going to go racing. So I go to the Bridgestone School at Shannonville.
Yeah.
And what's interesting is Peter McLaughlin was at the same school as I was, and he owned a company out of Chicago. I think it was Chicago Soft. I forget what it was. And we were at the same school, and he ended up buying SVRA when I'm wearing on the hat years later. And it was an interesting time because the vintage racing scene was really growing.
And why vintage racing for you? Simply because of the business?
Yeah.
Okay.
It made sense. I liked
for tax reasons.
Well, but I mean, it was legit. Like
absolutely.
Yeah. But it made sense to hang out with. I still remember when SVRA put out their demographics, and the average SVRA member makes whatever it was, $300,000 a year, owns 6 collector cars, and you looked at the demographics and go, that's the guy I want to sell to.
Right.
And a 65R model, a Cobra, a Ferrari, all of the biggest and best cars were race cars.
Right.
So it really made sense not to go racing for the sake of racing, but to go racing for the sake of contacts.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So you bought a Hertz car.
Yeah.
And gutted it and put a roll cage in it and just sacrilege and made it a race car.
Original motor, virgin bodied California car, pulled the numbers match engine out of it, stitch welded all the seams, put a cage in it, and decided to go racing.
Did anyone give you shit for that?
Yeah, sure.
Didn't matter?
No.
Okay. So you get in the race car, and it's probably not stupid competitive, I assume.
The first race I did was a Barack race up here at Moseport, and it was in the rain.
Okay.
And
in the rain
with a 66 Shelby, and I won the race, which I thought was fascinating. It was part of it was, we learned to drive. In street racing, you're doing stupid stuff and skidding around corners and burnouts and things like that. And then growing up in the snow, you just used to driving.
Right. Sideways catch it,
and
whatever.
Catch it and whatever. And so I think car control was kind of instinctive because a Canadian kid driving in Canada.
Yeah.
But I really enjoyed it. And I remember, I forget who it was that first weekend said, remember, you got 80% of the grip in the rain. And I was too stupid to think anything else.
Right.
So I'm all right. So you break 20%
pretty close.
Earlier. Yeah, it's pretty close. So anyway, it was a ton of fun. We did well. And then I started racing in the U.S. and
in the vintage stuff.
Yeah. And did fairly well. And but I realized that a 66 Shelby was not going to be the car to win that group overall.
Right.
You could win your class.
Yep.
But you couldn't win overall. And that's a couple years later when I built the first Corvette.
Okay.
Yeah.
Let's leave it there for this one. This is early stages, and we'll do like part 2 and part 3.
Sure.
Thanks.
Thanks.